it's a real joy to have so many people from all across Canada join us in a very unique opportunity to share the agenda, the vision that I have, and the plan of action that I have to ensure that Canadians can once again start having an affordable and a comfortable life of living. I'm here to talk about the future of Canada for Canadians, for Canadian families and Canadian businesses. I know traditionally the media outlets have all gone to the major networks to have this conversation, to have debates in our country, but it is with great pride that I am here joined by one of Canada's top influencers with over 10 million followers on TikTok, and to really engage an audience perhaps that traditionally has not been involved in politics, and that is Mario. So Mario, thank you so much for joining. I think this is going to be exciting given the number of messages that we've had from so many people all across the country. I know that they were looking forward to this. So I'll let you take it over and then we will start.
Yeah, thanks very much, Ruby. I mean, it's great to actually set this up with you. And honestly, the one thing that I really do respect about you is the fact that, you know, I haven't been shy about, you know, my conservative views. And like I said before, is, you know, I've been a lifelong liberal. And I was always a lifelong liberal until Justin Trudeau came and things started moving too far to the left, where I'm being, you know, considered, you know, far right. And the thing that I respect about you more than anything is the fact that you're willing to have this debate and you're willing to have this open discussion with someone like myself that will ask very direct questions with you, because I think Canadians need to understand that when you become a leader and you want to become a prime minister, you can't be set up with softball questions. The questions that need to be answered need to be very tough questions. They need to be very direct, and they need to reflect the concerns of Canadians. And so in saying that, I mean, I really want to start off by, you know, asking you some questions, because I think Canadians really need to know what you really stood for, because you were never given that real opportunity to really present yourself and debate against the other candidates. Because as we saw last night, Chrystia Freeland was basically just agreeing with everything Mark Carney said, and she was called out on it. So what is the point of, you know, what is almost like your purpose? What is your point of differentiation if you're literally just agreeing with everything he says? And that just tells you, you know, the establishment, the Justin Trudeau MPs, they're all one and the same. And so, Ruby, in saying that, why don't maybe you give me an introduction of maybe introduce yourself to everyone and let us know like some of the key things that you think are important for you, and then we'll answer some questions, or I'll ask you some more questions from there.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. You know, Mario, first of all, I want to start off by thanking everyone for taking the time out of their busy schedule to be able to join us on what is a very unique opportunity to be able to talk about issues that are important to Canadian families and important to Canada. As was mentioned, when I started off my campaign for the leadership for the Liberal Party of Canada and to become the next prime minister in Canada, it was first of all to bring the party back to the center. And it was with the opportunity to ensure that the membership and the grassroots actually had a voice, a real voice, into contributing to the decisions of the party, because we know for far too long there was the establishment that had complete control. Out of all of the candidates, I am the only candidate that has not been a part of the current administration. For the last 10 years, I am the only candidate that has actually been living in the real world and not the Ottawa bubble. I undertook the mission to join this leadership race, not because I needed a job, but because I had my ear to the ground. I had my pulse on the people. I have known firsthand of the many challenges and the sacrifices that millions of Canadians across our country are facing, the struggle that so many Canadian families face on a day-to-day basis. When people talk about the increase in home prices and the unaffordability to be able to buy a home, or the increase in crime rate in our country, or the high cost of grocery prices, I understand. When people talk about having their car stolen every 20 minutes in Ontario, I understand those issues. As a doctor, I understand the healthcare crisis that our country is facing, of having Canadians actually having to wait for hours and hours in hospitals or months and months for specialists. As a businesswoman, I understand the overburdening of taxpayers, of taxation that entrepreneurs and business people face in our country. I understand the increase in taxes, which are not allowing Canadians and seniors especially to have an affordable cost of living. The reality is the cost of living in Canada has simply become unaffordable. I launched my campaign to bring our party back to the center, to talk about solutions with the very real, because I was challenging the establishment, because I did not want the status quo. They ultimately decided to disqualify me. They wanted someone who would come along with the establishment, who would be with the current status quo. They wanted to continue with the same old. And as I started climbing in the internal polls, as our campaign started to gain momentum, because our campaign was coming forward with progressive policy ideas that were actually talking about delivering results for Canadians and for Canada, they decided to come at me with all these baseless accusations, which were false and fabricated. The ultimate goal of the party was to have me disqualified. It was to ensure that I would not be on that debate stage in Montreal. It was to ensure that Ruby Dhalla would be kept off of the ballot because they wanted to have a coronation for Mark Carney. But I am here tonight in this debate to talk about my plan, about talking about the agenda, talking about real solutions to ensure that we can deliver results. The same insiders who worked in the Ottawa bubble for the last 10 years can certainly not fix it. Last night's debate was more of a family group chat. I am not here to have a family group chat. I am here to actually have a debate, to talk about issues, to ensure that we start meeting the need of the hour of Canadian families, of Canadian businesses, and of our country. I am the candidate that wanted and will be bringing change. And as the Prime Minister, I wanted to have the opportunity to have someone who had their ear to the ground, who had the ability to connect with people. So for all of those that thought that the party would try to silence me, the people have spoken. We have had 5.8 million impressions over the last 96 hours. People are fighting for democracy, they're fighting for fairness, and they're fighting for justice. Because under a Dhalla government, we would have ensured that Canada's comeback starts now, a Canada in which every Canadian would and should have a voice.
Ruby, I'm going to ask you a question. So let me ask you about the CBC, and this is going to be I'm going to elaborate on this a bit. So the CBC, it generally gets approximately I think $6 or $7 billion per year. One of the MPs just said they want to double their budget. Now, to me, at least in my opinion, I don't believe a state should own a broadcast network the size of CBC. You are effectively owning mainstream media. A month ago, 76% of Canadians had no idea who Mark Carney was. Mainstream media pops in, and all of a sudden he's leading in the polls. And so, for the grandmothers and grandfathers that are, sitting behind the TV, why on earth wouldn't the Liberal Party, who is in control and pays the bills and pays the salary, not understand that there is a bias? So my question to you is, would you defund the CBC? Would you continue to fund it the way it's been funding? And given the way you found out directly through the CBC of your dismissal in the leadership race, how does that change your perspective at all prior to what happened in you being kicked out of the leadership race?
Well, it's quite interesting. We have the CBC, as you said, which is by the government of Canada, and the current party is the Liberal Party of Canada, to find out that a candidate would be disqualified from the Liberal leadership race and becoming Canada's next Prime Minister for myself on CBC was not only humiliating, but to me was very surprising of how CBC would actually receive that information before myself as the candidate. And I think that it is incredibly important when we talk about government funding for media, we don't continue to put all of our eggs in one basket and continue to have the CBC funded as the sole media outlet. There are a number of podcasters which have, great, a high number of listeners, which have a great penetration into the Canadian market. There are a number of influencers through social media channels, a great penetration and a great audience within Canada. We need to ensure that we diversify the funds. Instead of having CBC get all of the government's funding, we need to ensure that we actually start looking at other media outlets and other means of communication versus the major networks. The reality is that media has changed. People now are accessing social media even more than all of the networks across the country. I think the TRPs last night, they were saying online for CBC, were only 8,000. And when we take a look, Mario, just at our combined following, you alone have 10 million followers, on TikTok. So when you take a look at those results alone, we need to ensure the government starts funding and starts supporting other media outlets, which are not necessarily the major networks, but starts actually supporting the small outlets, the smaller podcasters, the influencer, that the government's message actually reaches an audience which is all over Canada versus the CBC viewer.
Perfect. And now I want to ask you about immigration. What is so in the last 3 to 4 years, the average number of immigrants that have come into the country have been approximately 1 million. Our healthcare system, and people think that, and rightfully so, healthcare is covered under a provincial mandate. But when you have that many millions of people coming into the country, it sets up the healthcare for absolute failure because we're not building hospitals fast enough. Similar to how there's not enough housing in the country. We'll touch on that topic in a second, but can you tell me what your stance is on immigration, whether you think the levels where we are at today are sustainable, whether they should be reduced? And I would also like to know where your stance is on people who immigrate to the country and commit violent crimes. Should they be deported?
Well, firstly, when it comes to immigration, I'm the daughter of immigrant parents. I was born and raised in Winnipeg. My mom came to Canada in 1972. She came here, leaving behind a great life, but she came here for the future of our children. And I don't think that she ever would have imagined when she first immigrated to Canada, going through all the struggles and sacrifices and the hardship that she did, like many, many millions of immigrants in Canada, that her daughter would one day be running to become Prime Minister in Canada. Because that, I think, symbolizes, the opportunity and the Canadian dream. When it comes to immigration, we must ensure as a country that we have planned immigration. I am pro-immigration, but I am for planned immigration. The targets that have been set by Trudeau's government at the moment, by the current administration, has been an injustice to the immigrants that have been let in, but also an injustice to so many millions of Canadians, because the reality is the people that have come and immigrated, there hasn't been proper housing for them. Our healthcare system, as you said, has overburdened and oversaturated. When we set immigration targets, we must ensure that our housing is aligned, our healthcare systems are aligned, that we have the proper infrastructure aligned. the government in the last year, because they knew that this was becoming a big problem, every week on the week kept on changing their immigration policy. It was as if they had no short or long-term plan. And it was sort of an overnight decision, it appeared, to allow all of the immigrants to come in and then not provide them with the support or the resources, and not even take a look at the impact on infrastructure, on housing, and on healthcare and other social services. I did say, Mario, right out of the gates when I announced my leadership bid, that I would actually deport people that have come here illegally. Now, some people took that in the wrong way, but I say to them, there are many avenues to come to Canada legally. You can come under the family reunification program. You can come as an economic investor to invest into Canada. You can also come under a student visa program. You can come under a work permit. There is no reason to have people coming here illegally and after due process continuing to stay illegally. There's also no place for human traffickers. It is unfortunate the government has not clamped down on this. We've also had a lot of people taking advantage of loopholes that exist currently in the immigration system. And under my leadership, this would come to a stop. It is very important for people in the outside world who are coming to Canada know that they must come legally. We cannot be a doormat for people wanting to get into the country illegally. And I would certainly ensure that if they are here after their due process that they've gone through, if that due process says they are illegal, they're going to be deported. On your last question about those committing violent crimes, there is no room in Canada for any type of violent crimes to be occurring by any immigrant, illegal immigrants, or those here that do not currently have citizenship. I am not going to tolerate under my leadership to have any type of hate crimes occurring against people for their religious beliefs, or have any type of violent crimes occurring for people that are here illegally. They will be.
Now, there's 50,000 students, and I'm going to use air quotes. There's 50,000 students that came into the country under those pretenses, and they were false pretenses. And in my opinion, they committed fraud. They said they're coming here as students. They didn't show up to the first day of school. And I've heard a lot of stories from my followers of people who chose the student route when they wanted to buy a business or start a business or get a job. And so they're using that as a way to actually get into the country. What would you do, or what would you say to those 50,000 people who came into the country and didn't show with their student visas, but did not show up to school?
Well, if you came here under the basis of a student visa and you have not shown up to school, which is a purpose that you came here for, then you haven't come here, even though you've entered through the legal route. You certainly are not abiding by this, and that's a loophole that the government needs to fix, and fix immediately. I would have zero tolerance for people that are abusing the system. I would have zero tolerance for people that are finding these loopholes. And ultimately, it's a responsibility of the officials of the current administration to tighten those loopholes up, so that if people are coming here under a student visa category, then they need to be going to school.
Now, I'm not sure if you knew this, but 50% of the Syrian migrants that came into the country are still under social services. They're utilizing their social services after 5 years. That number goes from 75% to 50% after a decade. So after a decade of being into our country, half of those migrants are still in the country. Likewise, I have heard stories of similar migrants where they will take a vacation and go back to their country. And that to me seems like a loophole. If you came here as an asylum seeker and you left your country for a specific, because you needed to seek shelter, because you're fearing for your life, why on earth would you take a vacation back there? And should the government not intervene when things like that happen? And should those social services be cut off? I'd like to understand your perspective on that.
Well, the first thing that I can say, Mario, I spoke about this during my campaign, is that as the leader and, as Canada's next prime minister, I would want to ensure that I really start focusing on the citizens of Canada. the people that actually live in Canada versus actually focusing on foreign conflict. We take a look at the number of people that have come. There are so many loopholes within the system that people are actually taking advantage of. We have people coming that, are taking on the services of different social, service programs. If they are required, yes, they should get them, because we as a country, have social programs which are at the heart and the foundation of who we are. But at the same time, dollars and resources have also become limited for anyone that is taking advantage of these types of programs, because there are loopholes in the system. That needs to be fixed, and it needs to be fixed immediately. I think that every government department needs to have a complete review. The review has to take out any type of loopholes that exist. The review has to ensure that we stop wasting taxpayer dollars in our country. And the review also must ensure that we minimize any type of wastage that is going on, to ensure that we have efficiency, that we have streamlined operations, and ultimately that we are actually going to deliver results to Canadians. As a business owner and as a self-made businesswoman, I always try to ensure that I have efficiency in every one of my government departments. And that's why it is very important that we start running government with more efficiency and less wastage, because ultimately it's the taxpayer dollars that are getting wasted.
Great. And now I want to further elaborate on the immigration, because I think that is a hot topic. I hear about it a lot. And I think it's because it affects so much of what we see. We recently saw, I believe it was the National Post, that just released an article that talked about Chilean gangs coming to Canada, and it's a crime spree vacation. They come to the country, they know we have these weak catch and release laws. They come here knowing that they're going to be out on bail anyways, and they're going to be able to flee the country no problem. I believe the number was $2 million that they found in a house of gold, Rolexes, I believe, luxury purses. They're targeting and hunting these neighborhoods. And part of the reason is because of the daylight savings times. And so, that is wreaking havoc on and this is an example of how immigration is wreaking havoc on our need for more police. That creates more taxes. It creates a bigger tax burden. We have to employ more people. Now, what would you have to say about these illegal, these illegal activities being done by immigrants or visitors to our country that are coming under these pretenses? Why should they get to stay in the country and get access to bail and not allow the police to basically start the process to basically deport them?
Well, my first question is, what type of loopholes do we have in our system currently which have allowed individuals with these types of criminal backgrounds to actually enter into Canada? It's a clear indication that we need to tighten up the system. We need to close these loopholes and ensure that proper background checks on every person that is immigrating to Canada. We can no longer become a haven for having immigrants from other countries, which are criminals, being allowed into Canada. We need to put our foot down. We need to clean up the system, and we need to close all of the loopholes. And I spoke about this in my leadership campaign, because I would have ensured as Prime Minister that that was going to be done on the first week on the job. There can be zero tolerance for this. When people know that there are loopholes in the system, exactly what you describe happens. People actually take advantage of it. And we as a country have limited resources. We have limited dollars. We need to start focusing on services and on programs which are going to benefit our economy, which are going to benefit Canadian families, and which are going to support Canadian families, seniors, young people, working class people. There are just so many Canadians that require our support, our resources, and our help. And unfortunately, so much money is being spent on different programs and where there are loopholes, where so many people, like you described, are actually taking advantage of. That needs to come to a complete stop.
Now, this is probably, I would say, the thing that irritates Canadians the most. And this is the consistent thing that I hear a lot about.
I've heard a lot of things that irritate Canadians, so let me hear this one.
We budgeted, I think the number on the part of the number of the deficit that was delivered by Chrystia Freeland of the $62 billion deficit that we have, $16.8 billion was earmarked for asylum seekers and immigrants coming into the country. What business does Canada and Canadian taxpayers have in funding four-star hotels, giving them access to the child benefit program that gives them $8,000 per child per year? So if you have 3 kids, you're getting a $25,000 check from the government. If you've been here for 2 years, they will backdate it and give you a $50,000 check. They're getting free food, free housing. I hear that if you're pregnant and you don't have access to a vehicle, you can they pay for the Ubers. And so they're paying for Ubers. They have these allowances that Canadians who we have 100,000 homeless, I believe in Ontario alone, do not have access to. So my question is, what would you do? Would you change that? What's your position on that? And what business does Canada or even Canadian taxpayer dollars have to these people coming into this country who are seeking a better life, but we're funding it for them with increased taxes?
Like I said, I am sort of zero tolerance on people taking advantage of loopholes that would exist, within the immigration system. We really need to put our foot down and put a stop to this, because like you said, there are many people that come here, some of them all genuine people, which, we need to set targets of how many people are that are coming from countries that need our support are we going to help. But at the same token, having people come here to take advantage of the system, I also hear of many stories where people are just frustrated at the number of people that have been given refuge in hotels, that have been given social benefits and haven't actually worked, and even though they're able to work, we need to help and support those people that are not able to carry out or be able to continue to work or to receive, the benefits that they actually require, versus helping everyone who may not even receive it. I think ultimately government has to be tough. They're going to have to be strong. Government's going to have to take some bold decisions. And yes, everyone may not like it, but we need to ensure that we start investing in our country, investing in citizens, to ensure that we actually have robust systems for healthcare, for seniors, childcare programs, dental programs, and for the people that genuinely need help, we need to help them. But right now, there's too many people taking advantage of the system, as you said, whether they're getting Ubers or whether they're getting other social programs which they don't require. I mean, this needs to come to a stop. And, people always ask, well, if we've spoken about investing in healthcare or childcare and dental programs or other important programs that we have in our country, even like unemployment insurance, where are we going to get the money from? I see on the chat, a lot of people are talking about, DOGE, about the government efficiency that has been put in the United States. I actually think that DOGE is also very important, to be done here in Canada. It's important for government efficiency, to be maximized. It is important to have efficiency in our systems, because ultimately, whose money is that? That's taxpayer dollars. Why should hard-earned taxpayers' money being put to waste with, overspending government programs or having programs which are not delivering, or even having loopholes in the system? I can assure you that I would definitely ensure that these loopholes that you've mentioned, which are frustrating and upsetting to Canadians, and rightfully so. Mario, I actually had a town hall during the leadership campaign. I was getting restricted and blocked and delayed from communicating with registered members from across the country. So I decided to overcome that obstacle by holding these virtual town halls. And some of the stories that I heard were just heart-wrenching. There was a woman, one that sticks in mind on one of the town halls, who was covered up in a blanket. And she shared her story of how she is working 2 jobs and had a blanket on her because she had turned the heat down, in her home, so that she could reduce her utility bill and actually afford her rent at the end of the month. And those types of stories touch you. And I think to myself, why is it that government is spending so much money on foreign conflict? Why are we spending and investing money into people who are taking advantage of the system and finding these loopholes for programs that they do not need? Why is that? We need to put a stop to this to ensure that we start delivering programs and services to those who need it. We stop closing loopholes, and we have leadership that is willing and able and experienced to actually take bold decisions for the benefit of our economy and the benefit of our country.
Now, I think it was last year's budget in 2023. Yes, I think it was the 2023 budget. The Liberals allocated, I believe it was over $80 billion to what I see. It's effectively corporate welfare. And an example of that is when they give Stellantis or Volkswagen a $14 billion or a $20 billion subsidy, publicly traded company, not Canadian owned. The plants were not going to be built by Canadians, but they're going to create 2,000 jobs. And when you do the economics behind the 2,000 jobs and paying the billions of dollars, you would have been better off just paying each of these people at least $1 million. Now, when it comes to corporate welfare, and I think you'll appreciate this, Ruby, as a small business owner and as a business owner yourself, small, medium, large, why is it that the biggest corporations in Canada get the most money and the little guy gets nothing?
That's what happens when you keep on electing elites, all people that are involved with the World Economic Forum, WEF, as they call it. And that's what happens when you have the establishment who doesn't let anyone in for the last 10 years. I was trying to challenge the establishment, but obviously there's a lot of egos that got bruised. That's why they wanted to keep me off that debate stage, because I can tell you, if I would have been there last night, or if I would have been there today as well on that debate stage, it certainly would not have been a friendly group chat. Canadians want to hear someone who has a vision, who has a plan, who has the experience to actually execute it and deliver results.
And honestly, on that point of WEF, and I think this has been a hot point of contention because so many, I think, Canadians have denounced it. Klaus Schwab has actually been caught on video saying that we've infiltrated the government. We've infiltrated governments. Look at Justin Trudeau. We have so many members of parliament. He's explicitly has said that. And the WEF agenda is really a large globalist agenda. And they're the ones that have coined the phrase "you will own nothing and be happy." Now, what is your stance on WEF? What business does Canada have being a member of the WEF? And why is Mark Carney such a strong advocate? And I can't remember what his position is, but I know he's a very, very strong advocate of the WEF agenda. Can you elaborate on the agenda, what your position is and what you know of it?
Well, I don't know much about it, Mario, to be very honest, about the World Economic Forum, because I've never been invited in and I'm not a part of it. And it was evident that I'm not a part of it because I got disqualified from a leadership race. Perhaps if I would have been and I would have known more about it, I would be on stage here in Montreal. But it's so much better talking to you anyways, through our social media. But it's very clear, unless you're part of the establishment, the party does not want to have any voice which challenges the status quo, which does not want to have a voice which really challenges establishment. And people ask, why were you challenging the establishment? I was challenging the establishment because I never entered the leadership race to be a pretty face. I never entered the leadership race to be a seat warmer. I actually was entering the leadership race to speak up on issues and talk about solutions, to talk about progressive policies that are important to Canadians who are struggling at this point in time in life, unlike any other. I was entering the race because I wanted to ensure that we as Canada, as a country, are respected internationally. We've lost our voice globally. We're being walked on and stomped on by the President of the United States of America. And guess what, Mario? The government did not have a plan. The very same economic advisor who has gone to all of these fancy universities, Harvard and Oxford, he was advising the Prime minister. My question tonight would have been with all of these credentials, with being the governor for the Bank of England, one of the most prestigious institutions, why was there not a plan for our country and for Canadians to overcome the threat of the tariff taxes from Donald Trump? Why is it that we as a country invested all of our eggs in one basket over the last 10 years into the United States? And why is it, Mr. Carney, because we've invested all of our eggs in one basket, that we have a foreign leader right now who is hijacking our economy and is holding our entire country and our country's economy at its mercy? Under a Dhalla government, I can tell you one thing, that never would have happened.
Now, I got to ask you this. We have the third,
as you could see.
and I want to ask you this. We have the third largest oil reserves in the world, only behind Saudi Arabia and Venezuela. Would you expand the pipelines? Would you have given the LNG that Japan was asking for? And would you have given an LNG pipeline to Europe, which Germany was asking for?
Well, the first thing I would have done is as they say, I would have had that oil flow from Alberta, because Alberta's success is our nation's success, and that oil would have been flowing. We would have had a pipeline, from east to west. We also would have had LNG terminals in Quebec, out in the East Coast. Warren Buffett at one time, Mario, wanted to invest $4 billion into an LNG terminal. I could tell you, my first week on the job as Prime Minister, I would have called Warren Buffett and said, last time you wanted to invest $4 billion in Quebec, this time I'm asking you to invest 10, because we are going to remove trade barriers that exist amongst all of the provinces in Canada. I would have ensured that we actually create, an independence in our economy and remove all of the interprovincial trade barriers. I find it very interesting that some of the candidates now that were running against me all talk about removing interprovincial trade barriers, because for the last 10 years, it has been, much easier for businesses in our country to have their products flowing from north to south instead of from east to west. I would have ensured that we remove those trade barriers to allow for that trade to actually stimulate our economy. We would have had a pipeline, we would have had oil flowing, we would have had all of the approvals that were necessary for the LNG terminals. And the last thing that I would have done, Mario, I actually would have opened up Canada for business by creating a single window for clearance to make it more efficient, to make it easier for businesses throughout the world that actually want to invest in Canada. There are so many hurdles and so much red tape that even businesses or multinationals that want to come into Canada, which are going to help in the creation of jobs, it is so difficult. They just walk away and they start investing in other countries throughout the world. I would have ensured that we bring in these businesses and actually have joint venture agreements, partnerships done, with Canadians, with Canadian businesses, to open up our country, to create jobs, to stimulate the economy, and actually have more prosperity for Canadian families and Canadian businesses. The reality is, in the last 10 years, the government never did its job to allow for that success and that prosperity in our country.
Let me ask you this. Mark Carney, he's in the front. He's the front runner to win the leadership race, particularly now with your exit. I truly believe you were a strong contender against him. I think in the debate, you would have done absolutely phenomenal. You're clearly sharp. You're on the ball. He will not disclose his conflicts. He will only do so if he becomes prime minister. Now, he also has other conflicts of when he was named the top economic advisor or the head of the economic task force, he was also the chairman of Brookfield. And then all of a sudden they're having a conversation to create a $10 billion fund with Brookfield using the government's money. Now, how on earth is that possible for the Liberals to be okay with that? I would like to understand, like, from your perspective, is that normal, like, under the party? And I'll say I'm relatively new actually, I'm very new into politics compared to you. And I think a lot of people watching have never really gone into the depths of politics like you have. And so I would like to know, What's your position on some of the conflicts that seem to exist there with Mark Carney?
Well, there's a lot of conflicts. We see a lot of questions. They were going after me for financial violations, which were, these supposed financial violations that they're saying there's so many against Carney, but the party, as you said, it makes you scratch their head because they seem to turn a blind eye for their blue-eyed boy because they want him coronated. And I have to say right off the bat, I don't know Mr. Carney. I've actually never met him, but I thought when I was entering the leadership debate, I wasn't going into, an election to run for high school president. We are here electing the leader of the Liberal Party of Canada and someone who would be Canada's next prime minister. And I thought that it was very important to hold all of the candidates, especially the one that was being backed by the entire establishment, the one that was being, the one that establishment wanted to have a coronation for. I thought it to the plate and asked those questions, but instead they tried to silence me, and then they ended up disqualifying me because if I was on that debate stage tonight in Montreal, I can assure you I would have been asking some of these very, very tough questions, whether it was the record on Brookfield, whether it was, the investments that they have made. But most importantly, I've been asking him about his tenure as the advisor to the current prime minister within the Liberal government of why we as Canadians are suffering, why our economy is at its lowest point. Why is it in 23 years our dollar dropped to a historic low? If we have all of these credentials of an individual who's being touted as one of the greatest economic minds that Canada has had, why Canadians are struggling, that seniors are having difficulty make ends meet. Why is it that the grocery prices in our country have resulted in people not being able to put food on the table, or businesses that are just doing a mass exodus out of Canada because they don't see opportunity in our country? These are the type of questions that I would have asked of why we have not invested in our country and in Canadians, and instead have focused so much of our monies on foreign conflicts, on foreign individuals, or invested all of our eggs in one basket in the United States. And now we end up in a situation as Canadians, we're left scrambling. So I would have been asking Mr. Carney point blank, why did you not have a plan? You had 10 years to fix this. You couldn't get the job done then. Why is it that you think that you want the job now? And Mario, you also brought up a very important point about our, campaign, growing, and our momentum was building, both in the terms of the number of people that were signing up, that believed in this vision, that wanted to have a fresh face, someone who had fresh ideas and a fresh vision. But the Liberal Party of Canada silenced it and disqualified me. Well, I think the last 96 hours have actually been a wake-up call for the entire establishment, when we've had 5.8 million people engaged on Twitter alone. And I'm looking forward to seeing the results tonight for this, social media debate that we are doing on the social media, to find out actually how many people, in the millions, are probably watching this. So we will do a comparison tomorrow of the TRP ratings of the debate in Montreal and this one that's happening here, because people wanted to ask the front runner questions. That's why they were believing in me.
Now, what's your take on the carbon tax?
On the carbon tax, I did announce the first day on the job as prime minister, I would have ended the carbon tax. I think Canadians are paying way too much tax as it is. We need to ensure that Canadians are not having to pay the price for industrial polluters in our country. The other announcement that I made, which I think many of the viewers that are here tonight would want to know, I would also have Canada withdraw from the Paris Accord. Over the last number of years, we have spent $7.5 billion helping other countries to achieve their environmental goals, to achieve their climate reduction goals. I want to start investing in our country and utilize the dollars that we are spending abroad right here at home.
Now, we briefly touched on the Department of Government Efficiency, which Elon Musk is heading up, and the concept of DOGE. What programs do you think right now, off the top of your mind, are just overinflated, that we need to take another look at maybe not cut out completely, maybe we're reducing it, maybe we're cutting some out. Can you tell us what programs you see being problematic and where we're overspending money?
I think the first one comes, with the Paris Accord as an example. We're spending $7.5 billion, on helping other countries. We have a lot of money as well, Mario, being spent on foreign conflicts. I'm always one for generosity. I'm always one to help others, but you can't be helping others when the reality is your own house is burning down. We need to take a look at global affairs, in its entirety to see where can we start saving money and where do we actually need to invest money to build stronger trade relationships, to build greater economic, alliances so that we are not dependent on one person. I would rather have the money spent right here at home. We take a look at the issue of housing, no matter which Canadian you talk to, regardless of the province that they're living in, the price of homes has become so expensive. You have young couples who have gone to university, who've educated themselves and actually are working in decent paying jobs. They're still living at home because they can't put a roof over their head. You have other individuals who are renting right now, wanting to own a home, but guess what? The price of housing is too expensive. We need to ensure that we actually have government programs that are going to deliver results. So I think when it comes to global affairs, when it comes to foreign conflicts, when it comes to a program like the Paris Accord, there's $7.4 billion right there. And then you take a look at other programs, as you mentioned, that have loopholes in them. We need to stop those loopholes to ensure that we actually not only within those loopholes of immigration or any other social program, that we do a complete review of all of the departments, very similar to what is in the United States that has been created with the Department of Government Efficiency. We need to bring that here in Canada to ensure that we start looking at departments, we remove all of the waste, we run everything more efficiently, and ultimately deliver results for Canadian taxpayers.
Now, Donald Trump 2 days ago said he's going to be implementing the tariffs, and I believe that's going to start in approximately 2 weeks. I think he said it was March 4th. And the day after, Trudeau and the Liberal Party announced that they'd be giving $5 billion to Ukraine. Europe committed $3.5 billion to Ukraine, and they're literally right beside it. We have an ocean separating to us. How is it that Canada is outspending a whole continent in terms of what they're giving to Ukraine? And we've already, I believe, given or allocated or loaned, however you want to word it. Actually, I think it's more given, nearly $20 billion. What is with the obsession that the Liberal Party has with Ukraine? What is your position on the billions of dollars that have been given to Ukraine? And how would you do things differently, if anything at all?
And I don't want to offend anyone who believes in this, because I am, once again, very generous in the sense that, I always love to help people, but I would, as Prime Minister, have to make some very tough choices. And I can tell you, I would not be spending $5 billion of Canadian taxpayers' money in Ukraine. We need to ensure that we start spending those billions of dollars here at home. Canadians want to ensure that we focus on citizens, not on foreign conflicts. We have not only invested this $5 billion, but I think that at the end of the day, we've also invested many billions more in other situations. We took a look at the conversation that happened, I believe it was a few weeks back, with the President of the United States and Russia, but Ukraine wasn't even at the table. So I think that Canada can actually help and assist, countries by having their voice heard about bringing together, different countries, their leadership, to actually collaborate peace deals versus investing money in all of these foreign conflicts and all of these wars, because what ends up happening is that it is close to, it is at the end of the day an environment that it hits really close to home, and Canadians want Canadian taxpayer dollars being spent right here at home, not on foreign conflicts. And I just wanted, before I go on to the next one, Mario, it's quite interesting. I just received word from my team here. That's why I was looking up. The current online ex of the Liberal Party of Canada has a total of 8,000 viewers. And guess how many you and I have today? We have close to 30,000 people that are watching to hear about the vision that Ruby Dhalla had for the leadership race and to become Canada's next prime minister. So I think that this is a testament to really starting to focus government spending, if I were prime minister, on media outlets that are in the digital space, on podcasters, on influencers. We've been able to reach 30,000 people tonight, and I just think that this is a testament to the powerful voice that all people have. They tried to silence Ruby Dhalla. They tried to disqualify Ruby Dhalla. They tried to not have Ruby Dhalla on the debate stage. Well, guess what? You can only silence someone for so long because the people have actually spoken. So thank you so much. And I also want to point to a QR code that we have here up on our screen on the, it's my top right and maybe your top left. This QR code, there's a lot of people that have been messaging in the chat and messaging us as well about contributing and donating to the campaign. Guess what else the Liberal Party did when they disqualified me? They cut my donation link, but we still have a lot of campaign expenses, to be paid that must be done by fellow donors from all across Canada. So I would request anyone who is excited about this message, who believed in my campaign and my vision, to please take a few minutes to scan that QR code and to donate. It will be a donation through Elections Canada, but it will definitely help with our campaign expenses that we have accrued.
Well, that's great. That's amazing news about the viewership. And I think
Good job, Mario.
Yeah, and when I did my first podcast, or sorry, you were my second podcast. And for those who don't know, it's already up on YouTube. I've asked you some very tough questions on there as well. And it went really, really well. And so that is now live on my YouTube. Just if you go on YouTube, go to Mario Saves Canada. I pushed it out on X. I've pushed it out on TikTok and on Instagram. And what I have to say is, it's amazing. And I brought this up before, that when Mark Carney announced his leadership bid, the amount of people that watched it live on Facebook, which is one of his major platforms, he had a total of 86 people watching it. And it just goes to show you that, when people believe in something, they are going to view it. And I think a lot of Canadians are rooting behind you, because the first step was, and this is going to lead to a very important question that I have. The first mistake that the Liberal Party did is they were not transparent as to why Chandra Arya was disqualified from the leadership race. He just got a letter saying, basically, you're out of here. And he, rightfully so, tweeted out, by doing this puts into question the legitimacy of the leadership race and thus the legitimacy of the next Prime Minister of Canada. And he was right. That was a massive, massive mistake. And they just made another huge mistake with you. And they did so in a way where they used the same mainstream media that they own to deliver the news to you. So my question to you is, do you think that this was done because you were such a legitimate threat to Mark Carney? And do you think there is some racism behind this? Because that is two people of color that were removed from the leadership race, and now there is no one of color left in the leadership race.
Well, for the Liberal Party that says it's the Liberal Party of Canada, I don't think it turned out to be liberal after all. Not only for people of color that were kicked out in this leadership race, they've also kicked out some very strong, smart, intelligent, successful women like Dr. Jane Philpott, Jody Wilson, Selena. Those are the ones that we know about publicly, and who knows what's happened behind closed doors. So I question how liberal the Liberal Party of Canada is when it's kicking out people, with all of these false and fabricated allegations. It's complete nonsense. And then to put the icing on the cake, to be humiliated, on national television by the CBC, which is government funded, to me, it's just completely disgusting. It's shameless. And I don't care whether someone supported me or didn't support me, whether someone is a liberal or a conservative or an NDP, that's just something that was completely shameless. And I think that the people have spoken, and that is why people were so furious, and so angry. That is the only way to describe having 5.8 million people in the last 96 hours come out in support, because what they did, it wasn't about me. This is an attack on democracy. This is an attack on people wanting to vote. We have a right to vote in this country. And if they wanted a coronation that badly from Mark Carney, I don't understand why have a leadership race that's turning out to be a sham. Last night's debate, and reading comments from individuals, it was like a family group chat. We are in an election campaign to elect the next leader, to the next prime minister, and this friendly family group chat is not going to be able to give people, a choice. When I entered the leadership debate, I talked about change. I talked about being a breath of fresh air, bringing a fresh voice, coming out with ideas that were progressive in nature. I get disqualified, and all of a sudden there's these liberal talking heads on the mainstream network, CBC being the primary one, and they're talking about, she was really, really aggressive in her campaign. Well, that's the whole point of an election campaign. Oh, she was attacking Mark Carney. Well, if he's a front runner and you guys want him coronated, my job in the campaign is to talk about my vision. And if people don't like me, they don't need to vote for me, but give people a choice. I don't understand, to put all of the icing on the cake. They were so scared about having Ruby Dhalla, on the debate floor. They were so scared about having me on the ballot. I was born and raised in Winnipeg. I haven't gone to Harvard. I haven't gone to, Oxford. But I am a doctor. I have been elected 3 times as a member of parliament. I have started off my own business. I have worked, for everything I have from the ground up. How could you be so scared of someone with those credentials and the credentials that your golden boy has, of you wanting to elect him as leader and as prime minister? I mean, if they were scared of having me on this debate floor, I can only imagine what's going to happen when it comes to a federal election and he actually has to debate Pierre Poilievre. So this is all just very amateurish and playground conversation. We were in a leadership race to have a real election, and Canadians just thought that my disqualification was an attack on democracy. It was an attack on fairness and justice in our country. I genuinely and wholeheartedly want to thank you to, the millions of people that have engaged. Mario, one post of ours on the disqualification, I think we're up to 1.3 or 1.4 million views. The total membership of the Liberal Party is 400,000 for all those that signed up. So that Canadians were looking for a voice that was different. They were looking to have a voice that was status quo, that would challenge the establishment. And I'm sorry for the Liberal Party of Canada, because I wasn't here to be a pretty face. I was here to actually talk about change and talk about results for Canadian families.
Now, you brought up a good point, and I fully agree with it. Like, what kind of message, them doing this to you, does that send to immigrants? What kind of message does that send to little girls that want to grow up and be the prime minister and be like you? And you're right, this is a total attack on democracy, and it completely questions the leadership race and thus the next prime minister of Canada. In saying that, you hit the $350,000 mark. That's how much you have to put up in order to be able to enter into this leadership race. This is after tax dollars that people donated. And to give people just some rough math, if I'm donating $1,000, I will likely have to earn $1,300 or $1,400. That's how much I actually truly then donated. So with all these hardworking Canadians that donated the dollar figures, and I've seen the donations that came through your way and the donations that went to Mark Carney, where he's maxing out donations consistently. He clearly has an elitist base, where you seem to have a base that is more for the hardworking average Canadian. Will they be getting that money back?
2 things that I actually want to talk about, and I know that you interviewed me earlier on today for your podcast, and before we started the podcast, I became very emotional. When I was actually doing my appeal and my submission to the Liberal Party, I had this whole speech written, and before I started this submission to this joint committee, just about 2 minutes before, I had received a text message from a reporter telling me that I would be disqualified that day, and it would not be because of foreign interference, but it would be because of financial violations. And he also stated in his message that they did not want me on the debate stage firing at Carney. I ditched my entire speech that I was going to do that day, and I just spoke from my heart. And when I spoke to the committee, I wasn't speaking on behalf of myself. I wasn't even worried about myself because I never went into this leadership race looking for a job. I went into this leadership race to be a voice for Canadians and Canadian families that are struggling. And I pleaded with them. I said, my disqualification will send the wrong message. It will send a message to young people in our country. It will send the wrong message to people who are immigrants in our country. It will send the wrong message to people who are from multicultural communities and those that are women and women of color. And I begged them because this would send the wrong message. And they obviously did not listen because they had a predetermined agenda. They didn't want anyone that would bruise their egos. The Liberal Party certainly didn't want anyone that would question the election, that would question the establishment. And I told them that I was not coming into this race to be a seat warmer. They disqualified Chandra Arya. I do not know the details of that. And then they went and disqualified me. And you take a look at the optics that are on the stage today, it is not representative of Canada. I was speaking up in a voice for hardworking Canadians. Why? Because I haven't been born with a silver spoon in my mouth. And I gave this campaign, and I've dedicated my life to public service, to being a strong voice. And what the Liberal Party of Canada has done is unforgivable. And even more unforgivable that not one of the candidates and not one of the elected members of Parliament had the decency or the courtesy or the courage or the strength to actually reach out and say, do you know what? What the Liberal Party did is wrong. They all stood up and they support the establishment. And I can tell you, if I was elected and this happened to another individual, I would have had the common sense, the courtesy, the sympathy to call that person up and join them in their support of saying that what the Liberal Party of Canada has done. What they have done is disgusting and despicable. And then, as you mentioned, Mario, you know when they started asking questions? After $350,000 was given to the Liberal Party of Canada. That wasn't the money of Ruby Dhalla. That was the money of hard-working Canadians across this country. That was the money donated by Canadians who believed in the vision that Ruby Dhalla had for the party. That was the donations of monies from Canadians who believed in the vision that I had for our country. And I have asked the Liberal Party again, and I'm sure they have their talking heads watching this debate that we are having and this analysis and conversation on our social media feeds. Maybe they're one of the 35,000 people that are joining us right now. I would ask them to do what is the honorable thing, to do the right thing, to do the right thing that has the integrity that this type of process deserves, is to return the money of $350,000, not to Ruby Dhalla, return the money to the donors. It is the right and the honorable thing to do. You've already humiliated me, and you have ensured that you have tried to silence me and disqualify me, but do not attack hardworking Canadians and hardworking Canadian taxpayers. They deserve to have their monies returned by the Liberal Party.
Ruby, and it's interesting. I made a video a couple of weeks ago, and I actually read through the Liberal Party's um, guidelines. They revised them in early January, and one of those, I can't remember. I think they're the bylaws actually. And when I read those bylaws, one of the things that I saw in there is exactly what happened to you. And I made a video about it and I called it out and I said, this is disgusting. It gives them the absolute power and sole discretion to get rid of anyone for basically any reason. And that was very concerning because that power sits within a board. And so there is a small board that effectively has already chosen who the next prime minister is. They've already erased the two biggest threats to the person that they want sitting there. And so I want the viewers to know that, this is something that exists within the bylaws and how it's written, and it allows them to get away with this. And I have to say, and I said it to you before, and I'll say it again, I think it's corrupt. I think it's disgusting. I don't agree with what they did. I don't think anyone does, because none of it makes any sense whatsoever. You're a Canadian. You're a former member of Parliament of the Liberal Party. Like you've already,
it's not the right color, Mario.
And that's what I'm getting to. Like you're a female, and it's because of what, you're a Canadian Indian, like because of your skin color. Like it is grotesque, and it sends the absolute wrong message, and it's going to turn so many people away from the Liberal Party. I think it's going to be a massive long-term mistake, because I truly believe, especially in the age of social media, the younger demographic that is watching this, that sees this, they will not forget and they will not forgive. And that's where we are today. Now, Ruby, I wanted to ask you, is there anything else that you think that the viewers should know that we haven't spoken about yet, that you want to let the world know about what your policies were, what your vision was for Canada?
Thank you so much, Mario. I'm getting a lot of questions here on the chat, and I was just trying to look. So if my eyes are, going sideways, it's because of the fact that I'm reading these questions that I'm getting. And one of them wrote, "I felt so sick to my stomach when I found out that they had kicked out Ruby. This is wrong." And so there's a lot of different questions coming out. Another one is, Ruby Dhalla, did you reach out to Chandra when he was disqualified? Yes, I did. I had immediately sent a message. I actually did a video both for himself and his supporters. I was not sure the reason that he was kicked out, because we have not heard from him. Some other people were asking if I had contacted Chandra to join today's debate. I did. I realize that he's still a member of Parliament, so I don't know what the establishment has said to him. So we did not hear from him, but I was hoping to have him join us. Mr. Arya had been welcome here on this platform, but next time. And then we have 8.9 thousand viewers on the Liberal X account of the English debate, and we have here almost 30,000. Then the next one, we love you, Ruby. You are the next Canadian Tulsi Gabbard. The Liberals are going to be get a rude awakening in the next election. The Liberal Party is good at confiscating money and freezing accounts. It was probably always their plan to use a couple of seat warmers to get more money out of the candidates. And we have Ruby Dhalla, you actually responded. I saw you in Two Chicks and Politics. Pleasure hearing you. Great. So lots of questions and feedback. I want to talk about one of your questions that you did raise, Mario, on other important issues. And I think one of the important issues that is facing our country, first of all, is healthcare. And as a doctor of chiropractic, I have great insight into our healthcare crisis in our country. I'm sure that all of the people that are watching this particular podcast and this debate, will have gone through a situation where either themselves or a family member has gone into the hospital, and guess what? They're having to wait for hours and hours in a hospital because there's no beds available. Or you're going to have a lot of seniors and other individuals who require appointments with specialists, and they have to wait for months and months. While they're waiting for months and months, sometimes their condition ends up deteriorating. We need to change that in our country. Our doctors, our nurses, our hospitals are completely overburdened. There's a lot of money being spent, but we have to see and do a complete review to ensure that our hospitals, our doctors, our healthcare workers, our nurses in our country are actually getting the resources and the support that they need. I have announced that as Prime Minister, I would have had a health czar appointed on the first day of the job to ensure that we do a complete review of these programs. And I know that people talk about federal and provincial, jurisdictions. This is an issue that we as a federal government need to take leadership on and work with the respective provinces across the country. The other important facet to my policy on healthcare was starting to support those that actually suffer from mental health issues. A mentally well Canada is a wealthy Canada. There are so many people that are suffering from different mental health issues. They themselves or family members or loved ones are suffering from addictions. We as a government need to start championing mental health in our country by providing universal health care, by having an individual, a CESAR for mental and health addictions, and also supporting our Indigenous communities. I've done a lot of work with many First Nation communities across the country, and they don't have access to the healthcare services that they need. Many of them don't even have healthcare centers on their reserves. We need to start ensuring that the Indigenous communities across Canada receive the healthcare services, that we start covering, as a government, providing the coverage that is necessary for mental health and for addictions, and that we also provide the support and resources, that our healthcare professionals need. But the other part of it is also to start delivering healthcare differently. Let's start utilizing our pharmacies that we have with our pharmacists. Let's start utilizing nurse care practitioners. Let's start engaging alternative healthcare practitioners, whether they're chiropractors or physiotherapists. Let's start making healthcare a multidisciplinary model instead of isolating, these individual verticals of healthcare professionals. The other part that I spoke about in healthcare is that some of the provinces where the doctors are probably have a cap on the number of patients that they can see. Why is that? If doctors want to see an X number of patients, per day, we need to ensure that we let them do that. So I had a lot of emphasis on healthcare and improving our healthcare crisis that exists in our country. The other facet, which we already touched on, was in regards to creating more affordable living, of giving more resources to our seniors who are struggling, and also giving support, to our young people who want to open up more businesses in our country, entrepreneurs, whether they want to invest in technology or crypto or blockchain. Let's become leaders in that field.
Ruby, I have a little surprise for you. You might be wondering why I'm kind of looking down. I'm holding a phone, and I'm actually doing the TikTok live stream.
Oh, wow.
Through here. And so someone, I just quickly caught a message, and they said, you have more viewers than CBC Live does on the debate. And we've had 132, we're approaching 132,000 viewers. So it's doing quite well. I think between both X and TikTok, we're getting a lot of viewership here. And I think even post this, there's going to be a lot of viewership coming in. So it's amazing that the social media the platforms that we both have.
I can tell you, as Prime Minister, I would invest in all of these media platforms, because that's how you engage people. Investing and putting all of our money into CBC and only one major media outlet, that is the past. The future is of influencers, like yourself, that are just doing a tremendous job in reaching out. I did a number of podcasts in my campaign, Two Chicks in Politics. I did Elevate. I did a few others. I mean, what great viewership they had from their audiences. I would want to invest in those people and those podcasts as Prime Minister of our country.
I agree, and truthfully, Ruby, like, and this is just more of an open discussion, but I really do believe the world has changed, and now the news is being consumed on social media. We're following people and their ideas. It used to be the case where you want to say something, you want to be a big name, you have to have your own TV show. Now all you have to have is your own phone, and you have to
Yeah.
have a good voice, and you have that you stand on, right? And I think I think a great shift that I have seen from at least the White House and Donald Trump is, I think his press secretary is a perfect example. She started, I think, through podcasts, through online, and that's how he actually selected her. And part of their mandate, and I'm not sure if you knew this, is they no longer just want to focus on the CNNs of the world. They literally are saying exactly what you're saying, where we want these creators. Like, there's people that don't have their TV shows on TV, but they'll have 10 times the viewership that any of these, news networks will have.
Like you, Mario,
And
10 million.
yeah, and just to give people some rough like stats, like on a monthly basis across, and I just started my Instagram account, I think like 2 months ago. I think I'm at, it's only at 70,000 followers.
I
It's
got
just,
a million
don't
there, so we'll be a good company, Mario.
Yeah. So I mean, I only have like 70,000 there, but that's only after 2 months. I'm at 15 million views. I think on TikTok in the last couple of months, I think I'm well over 100 some odd million views. And so the viewerships are definitely there. The voice is there. People are there. They're engaged and they're watching. And in saying that, Ruby, I think I'm going to be running out of battery soon here and on here. And I'm not sure if you wanted to wrap up with some kind of final words for everyone that have been watching. And I had a lot of fun doing this, and it was really nice having the real debate with you and getting people to actually understand who you are, what you represent, what you believe in, and what. And this is the chance that was not given to you, that was taken from you by the Liberal Party of Canada. And I think it is so grotesquely unfair, because I think people would realize that you are very logical in how you think, in how you speak, and how you behave. And you were the last and the only one that was a true outsider as part of the Liberal leadership race. And it's a shame that they took this away from us. And so I just want to say I'm grateful to do this with you, and I'm grateful to have the hundred some odd thousands of people listening to you, hearing who you are, and really appreciating your stance and your views, because I think it lines up with a lot of Canadians. And so, in saying that, some final words.
I first of all want to say thank you to you, Mario, for really taking a risk. I know that you're not necessarily involved in the world of politics, but I have a little bit of an interesting story before you leave. I'm going to stay on because I have a number of messages for people that want some more questions. So I'll continue on for a few more minutes after. But to Mario, when I started this campaign, I have always had a love for technology and for social media, because I think it's such a great way to engage. And one of my volunteers, we had a lot of young people on this campaign. One of my volunteers came to me and said, "Dr. Ruby, you have to see this guy." And he opened up your TikTok video. And I didn't even have a TikTok account, by the way. I was only focused primarily on Instagram and, a little bit of Twitter, or X as they call it. So I right away we got signed up for a TikTok account, and he shows me your TikTok and he goes, "Oh my God," he goes, "my dream would be to see you with Mario on TikTok." And I think when we started the campaign, you weren't really a big fan of mine. So he comes to me a few days later and he says, "Dr. Ruby, Mario's TikTok, he said something it's not nice about you." And then I said, "Why don't you show it to me?" So he was really hesitant to show it to me because he didn't want to offend me. And I said, "Don't worry, I'm in politics. I've already done 4 election campaigns, so show me what you got." So he showed me the first video, and I said, "You know what? He's a really cool guy." And it's so amazing, Mario, to connect with you subsequently, for you to reach out to your audiences. I think that is the need of the hour in our country, for us to engage more people, to really engage, a different generation of people. We've seen that the Liberal Party of Canada disqualifying me. They try to silence me, but when people speak, the people's voices are always so much louder. So I want to say thank you to all of your viewers and your listeners as well. Once again, we have a donate button. I hope that everyone, whatever you can do, whether it's $50, $100, or $1,000, I think Elections Canada limit is up to $17.50. We would really, really appreciate the support so that we can take care of all of the campaign expenses, since the Liberal Party of Canada, cut us off of our own donation link, but we do have one now. So I just want to say thank you, Mario. I hope that we have started a new movement. And once again, the numbers, 132,000 on your TikTok. I think we had about 30 to 40,000 here, maybe 11,000 now, but the numbers have gone through the roof. The one thing I can say for certain, with our 11 million followers combined, we tonight have made Canadian history because we have had more viewers in CBC of their 8,000. So incredibly exciting moment.
Well, thank you so much, Ruby. I really appreciate the time, the opportunity, and thanks everyone for watching.
Thank you. Once again, it was such a pleasure to join everyone here today. We're getting a lot of questions from individuals, so I am just going to go through some of them. Some of the people have asked about the Canada-US relationship and what I would have done as leader and as Prime Minister. I have said all along, firstly, that the President of the United States has continued to muse about becoming the 51st state. Unfortunately, none of the current candidates or the leadership of our current administration commented on that until many weeks after hearing these musings. I can tell you, as Prime Minister, I would have put that to rest the first day. So on my first interview that I did with Fox News and News Nation and a few other US outlets to talk about Canada-US relationship, the first thing I said that I would say to Mr. Trump when I became Prime Minister is, Mr. Trump, welcome to becoming Canada's 11th Premier. You're welcome to join any one of our provinces, or as the 11th province, or one of our territories. I think that calling him Premier Trump on that newscast ended up resulting in it trending all over Twitter. And then I also said that we needed to put this type of playground conversation to rest, of the president, saying that Canada would become the 51st state. We needed to ensure that we put a stop, because someone of that world stature, that type of commentary does not do justice. I have said that if I were to be elected as Prime Minister of Canada, as a businesswoman, and Trump being a businessman, I would have utilized my business acumen to negotiate the best deals for Canadian businesses, for Canada, and for our Canadian economy. I have met many Donald Trumps during my course of business, and I also believe that he needed to have someone that he actually respects, someone who has the ability to take him on. When it comes to the tariffs that he is wanting to impose, we have to ensure that we, at the end of the day, also provide those types of same tariff taxes to Americans. 27 states in America are dependent on Canadian products. We are the #1 importer for 27 states. For 11 of those states, we are the #2 importer. I believe that when you're handling these types of situations, it is so important to use diplomacy, but also to come from a place of strength, come from a place of knowledge, and come with the ability and the experience to actually be able to navigate and negotiate a great deal for our country. We also have, so that was a little bit about the Canada-US. The other 2 points that I wanted to mention on that, which are very important, is I do not understand why the Canadian government for the last 10 years has not focused on a buy in Canada, made in Canada approach. The first thing that I would have done as Prime Minister is I would have ensured that the leadership starts from the top. Why is the federal government, which procures billions of dollars in products and services, actually allowing foreign companies to purchase these products and services? Why do we not have a made in Canada incentive? Even if we don't have the manufacturing facilities, even if we don't have the opportunity to have those services, we need to start building and investing in sectors with products and services that the government actually requires. So I think that having a buy in Canada, made in Canada approach with leadership coming right from the top is critical importance. The other point that I would have to ensure a much stronger economy is not put all of our eggs in one basket in the US, but actually start creating stronger trade and economic partnerships with other countries. So that is a little bit of insight into the Canada-US relationship. Then we have here regards to different comments about refineries. I have stated that I would support Alberta in having their oil flow. I would also ensure that we reduce interprovincial barriers, that we would start with the building of the pipeline to ensure that we have a pipeline that goes from east to west, along with the LNG terminals. While we're talking about the LNG terminals in the East Coast, also for fisheries in Atlantic Canada, there's way too many restrictions. I've also spoken to many Atlantic Canadians, and you're going to be shocked to know they don't even have enough Service Canada offices which would provide individuals with their passports. Many of them actually have to travel for hours and hours to get a passport. I would ensure that all of the major cities actually have those passport offices or Service Canada offices to provide them with government programs. What would you do about our military? I did make an announcement that I would invest into our military. I would ensure that they have all of the equipment that they require. There is a lot of new activity occurring in the cyber world as well. We have to ensure that we have our military with all of the support and the resources to secure our border, to defend our border, and really to protect our country's sovereignty. And I did state that throughout my campaign, that my military spending, though, would be focused at home in the protection of our borders, and also taking a complete review at Canada's role in NATO. How much money are we spending in NATO? What are we getting out of that spend in NATO? And what do we need to do to realign with our priorities and our focus of our citizens here at home? Complaining about the fact that they've had to wait all day for their passport, and that's just yet another sign of government inefficiency, which I would bring to a stop. And then we have another comment here in regards to protecting Canada. I have spoken about defending and securing our borders. And protecting women's rights in sports. Yes, that is very, very important. I have spoken about the protection of women's rights in Canada. You can take a look at that on my platform. It says, just about everything you say is Pierre's platform, from Shirley. Well, the fact of the matter is the Liberal Party of Canada has gone so far to the left. Anything that is said, to the right of that left is seems like it's a conservative idea. But the reality of the matter is that these are just issues that are so important to Canadians. I haven't lived in the Ottawa bubble for the last 10 years like the other candidates. I've had my ear to the ground, my pulse on the people, and have actually witnessed firsthand some of these struggles, these sacrifices, and the challenges that people are facing. It says, can we exit the World Health Organization? Again, we need to take a look at our spending into the WHO to ensure that we realign our spending with our priorities. My priority would be the citizens of Canada. And it says, I would vote for you regardless of the party. I trust you, and I thank you for that. I'm going to do my closing statement, and I want to be able to share, with all of you some closing thoughts. Once again, we have our donation link up on the top right. I would appreciate, any support that anyone would give. You can also visit our website, ruby4pm.ca. you talk in neutral ground. I think actually some of the policies that I've mentioned are certainly not neutral. They are very towards the center, but they are actually the need of the hour more than anything else. I just want to say, you know, as we start wrapping this up and before I do my closing remarks, that today's turnout has really been incredible. And I really want to thank you for taking out, you know, your time. A lot of people have asked two very important questions. Number one, you have signed up to support for me, and now that the party has tried to silence me, what you should do with your vote. I will be giving that some thought. There's been a lot that's happened over the past 96 hours. I wasn't expecting this outcome. I entered this race. I was in it to win it. And I think that it was very important to still continue to engage with you. 5.8 million impressions in 96 hours is really unheard of. Someone's telling me here on the chat, Steve, that we've had almost 13,000 viewers. You're doing great, Ruby. You're amazing. And I just really want to share with you that everything that I did tonight, it was completely unscripted. I had no notes, and it's from the heart, and it's authentic, and it's real. And I think that's what people are looking for. So next steps of going forward, which a lot of people have been asking. I'm going to give some thought to the question of who everyone should support. If you have ideas, please do share them with me. The challenge is all of the candidates with the Liberal Party of Canada watching last night's debate. It was a friendly group chat. I think that we need to have leadership in our country. We need to have someone who is willing to take on, you know, the bold ideas and have the experience and the ability to be able to deliver them, and continuing to support the status quo, continuing to support the establishment, I don't think is a leadership that our country or the party certainly requires. People are asking about equalization payments. If you actually put your questions here on the chat and we haven't had a chance to get back to you, I will make sure that we do that afterwards. I have, I believe, a few more minutes left for my closing remarks. And I just want to say, you know, before, again, the closing, that this has taken a lot of strength. It's not something that I had anticipated when I started this leadership race, but to see the outpouring of support from everyone is something that is greatly appreciated. I'm very humbled. I'm very honored. And over the next few days, I will also be announcing another exciting project to keep everyone engaged, you know, in this process, because this is really about a moment of truth. It was about a moment of truth, you know, for our country. In our country, being a first world country, I don't think that there's a right to attack democracy or free speech or justice. And I would have just hoped that they would have had let the leadership race, you know, play out and allow the voters to decide. Our campaign was gaining momentum. We were winning. Our internal polls, you know, were showing the surge of ground well support, because I was the only one talking about policies that were resonating and connecting with Canadians. And I want to say, you know, in closing, that this is really a defining moment for our party. It's a defining moment for the country, and the same insiders that broke the system can certainly not fix it. You know, I was the candidate at the end of the day who dared to take the establishment on because I wanted real change. I was there to question the status quo. I was there to question the establishment, and I wanted to push them forward to start talking about policies and ideas which were the need of the hour in our country. If you wanted a leader who was going to fight for affordable housing, who was going to ensure that we would reduce grocery prices in the country, if you wanted a leader who was going to talk about reducing the crime rate in our country, toughening up on crime, reforming our bail system, and investing in our military right here at home to secure our borders, to defend our country, to ensure that we protect Canada's sovereignty, if you wanted a leader who was going to focus on actually creating jobs in our country, and also ensuring that we reevaluate our entire tax system in our country, because there were way too many Canadians paying high personal income taxes, business owners paying high corporate taxes. The list just goes on and on of the changes and the results that were required for a leader. I was someone who was experienced as a 3-time member of parliament, someone who was battle tested, battle ready, and someone who was not scared or afraid of a good debate, because that's what democracy and that's what election campaigns are about. And yes, they tried to disqualify me, they tried to silence me, but guess what? With the support of millions of Canadians, we still have that voice. We will still continue to ask questions and still continue to pursue the truth. Like I said when I started off my campaign, Canada's comeback starts now. And it is unfortunate that the system was already predetermined. They wanted to complete the coronation. They tried to keep Ruby Dhalla off the ballot. They tried to keep Ruby Dhalla away from the debate stage, and they tried to keep Ruby Dhalla away from asking the important questions that Canadians wanted to know. But with your words of encouragement, they all gave me strength to keep moving forward. Continue to fight. I will continue to stand up for Canadians, fight for our country, and ensure that Canada's comeback starts now. Thank you so much, and I'm so grateful to all of you today for joining. Thank you.